Hello, and welcome everyone to today's Fairygodboss Live webinar. We are so excited to have all of you join us. And I would like to just introduce myself right off the bat. I am Lasheen Williams, Enterprise Brand Strategist here at Fairygodboss. And now I'm so excited to kick off today's event, navigating. Oh, would you look at that? This is the world of Zoom. I have Amazon buzzing, but that's okay. There's someone else in the building to let them in. Today, we are going to be talking about navigating the job market, insider tips from top recruiters, sponsored by Capital One. I promise you guys, this is going to stop in a second, but this is New York, and that's how they do it. They keep buzzing obnoxiously, but they will stop in just a second. So, guys, bear with that noise that I've been dealing with my entire life. So for those who do not know, Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Millions of women visit Fairygodboss for career connections, jobs, community advice, hard to find intel about how companies treat women in virtual events just like this one. So we are absolutely thrilled to be joined by three leaders at Capital One: Kelly, Julie, and Nyla. So what I would love is if each of you could take a minute to introduce yourselves, please. We'd love to hear what's going on in your personal lives, professional lives, and what you do in your role today at Capital One. So Kelly, I would love it if we could start with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. My name is Kelly. I use she, her pronouns, and I am based out of our Richmond, Virginia office here at Capital One. In my life personally, I just got back from seeing Taylor Swift in the Eras Tour last week in Atlanta, and it is a lifetime highlight of mine. I cannot get over it. But I work here at Capital One and manage our cybersecurity recruiting programs, so our internship and full-time programs. And I've been in recruiting for most of my career, about 10 years. And personally, I recently got married as well, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you.
Oh my gosh, congratulations, Kelly. Nyla, I would love to hear a little bit about you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nyla. I have been at Capital One for about 7 years now. I am the university lead for Howard University, Spelman College, and the University of Puerto Rico Michaelis, and I am in charge of setting the recruiting strategy at those institutions. And in my spare time, I coach high school cheer and dance.
Wow, very, very nice, Nyla. Thank you. And then last but certainly not least, Julie, we'd love to hear an intro from you.
Awesome. I'm Julie Guild. I am a senior manager within our tech recruiting space here at Capital One. Been with Capital One for almost 6 years. Some of that time I was a contractor, and I just had my 5-year anniversary as an associate on Sunday. So I'm based out of our McLean office. I live in the DC area. I live in Arlington, Virginia with my husband. I am a big runner. I love to cook, huge fan of Ina Garden, and really enjoy exploring different restaurants and bars in the DC area.
Amazing, Julie. Thanks so much, and congrats on your anniversary there.
Thanks.
We have a lot in common with the running and the cooking, so we could be best friends. So again, everyone, thank you all for being a part of this fantastic webinar. This is going to be such great, tangible information for our audience to soak up. And I think the best way for us to get started is to ask, straight up, what tips do you have for people who are considering a career change and want to break into a totally new role or industry? Nyla, I would love it if you could kick us off.
Sure. Connections, networking. So I actually switched careers at one point in my life, and I chatted with a lot of people who were in a role that I was thinking about going into to make sure that it aligned to what I thought for myself personally. I think you never know sometimes based off of a job description. So reaching out and making connections, whether on LinkedIn or internally at whatever company you are at, is super important to make the right decision for you.
Absolutely agreed. Julie, any insight on this one?
I would agree with the connections. I think if you can identify a mentor, and whether that is somebody who you've interacted with and really look up to them in terms of how they work, their style, whether that's their communication style or leadership style. Or maybe it's somebody that you've never interacted with, but you've admired them. Like, shoot your shot, reach out to them. Um, I think it's also identifying the why and really understanding and seeing if you can really ground back to, all right, why is this new path of interest to me? Why does that align to my values or what I'm looking to get out of, the next chapter of my life? Because I think really understanding the why can help connect the dots and hopefully, really understand what that passion is so that you can really understand how to be the most successful in that next career journey.
Oh, I love that so much. Just identifying that why is so critical and something that I think a lot of people kind of skip over when they're trying to make that decision, and it's fundamental at the end of the day. So thank you, Julie. I also wanted to ask, as recruiters, what are 3 things about your company over at Capital One that you always make sure to highlight when talking to a candidate? And Kelly, I would love it if you could kick us off on that one.
Absolutely. So I love talking about our company culture here at Capital One. It's super collaborative. There are very few days where I'm kind of isolated, working in a bubble, not interacting with people either within my team or external, working with different stakeholders and business partners. I absolutely love the work-life balance. Capital One is a place where you can really succeed and excel professionally while still taking care of your own personal needs. And I've had nothing but encouragement to do that myself in my 4 years here as well. And then one thing that we say here at Capital One is bring your whole self to work. So being able to bring your whole self to work with the good and the bad, it's been the last few years are very interesting times to be alive. So being able to have those candid conversations with your colleagues and your manager about what is actually going on in your life has made it really life-giving to work here over the last 4 years. And those are some of the things that have really kept me here as well.
I absolutely love that, Kelly. You speak about, bring your whole self, right? And I remember back in the day, they used to say, leave your personal life at the door. You know what I mean? And I love to hear that Capital One is following this new kind of way of looking at the whole person and not just your work self and your personal self. So that's fantastic. Julie, I'd love to know what you think about this one. What are 3 things about your company that you always make sure to highlight when talking to a candidate?
I think the one first and foremost is our diversity, inclusion, and belonging journey. And really recognizing, I think that diversity, inclusion, and belonging is a top priority for every company. But at Capital One, like we really do mean it. And we see value in everybody's different perspectives, knowing that, our employees should be representative of the customers that we serve. And it goes along with what Kelly said in terms of bringing your whole self to work, recognizing that we want people to really be themselves when they step foot into the Capital One office or even are interviewing with us and really see value in diverse perspectives and around that journey, and really enhancing that diverse perspective within our organization. The second one I would say are our business resource groups, which we have a lot of different business resource groups to really empower and support our associates. Some of these are more diversity focused. So we have our tech business resource groups like Women in Tech and Blacks in Tech. We also just recently, within the last year, launched a new business resource group called At Family or And Family, which is to really support associates who are, maybe living with somebody who needs additional care and really navigating through that. And I think over the last 3 years, we saw a lot of that, of people working from home, managing home lives, and kind of figuring out the best way to support, one another and our associates. And I think the third one is our internal mobility. We are definitely an organization that promotes and supports internal moves. And I think that kind of goes back to your first question of like, how do you best prep for a career change? That was one thing that really interested me when I was interviewing with Capital One. I remember the recruiter was like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I always struggle with this answer. Like, I have no clue. But the recruiter's point of asking me that was saying, you're interviewing for a role within talent acquisition right now, but we really do promote internal mobility. And you do have the opportunity to move into, maybe it's something on the tech side, maybe it's a chief of staff or an HR business partner type role. And that was really attractive for me. Like, man, like I do have that opportunity to continue to grow my career, continue to move around the organization and not necessarily have to start over or leave Capital One.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for such a thorough and well thought out answer there, Julie. Thank you so much. So I have a two-part question. Part one, how should a candidate determine if a job is a good fit before applying to the job? Part two, what can candidates do to make their application and experience stand out from the crowd? Kelly, I would love for you to tackle this one.
Yes. So a couple things. My recommendation, and this is for candidates that I work with professionally and friends that know that I'm a recruiter and helping them kind of navigate the job market. When looking at a job description or a requirement, if you're looking at what they're looking for, the bullet points on the job description, and you're like, hey, I fit that, I fit that, I fit that, I have most of that. If those all answers are yes, I would say go for it. If you're hitting probably 3/4 of what they're looking for on the job description, there's a good chance that you're likely qualified for the position. So that's a great way to ensure that you have a high probability of being a part of the full candidate process. And then I always recommend doing your research and catering your resume to the specific role. If you're applying for, say, a software engineering position, you're going to highlight different skills than if you're applying for a chief of staff or HR position. So really catering your resume to the role. And my tip for that is in the job description, there's going to be things they're looking for, say team leadership, project management. When you're looking at your resume and catering it to that job description, do you have project management listed? Have you talked about your leadership experience? So I've always used the job description to really inform the way that I'm writing my resume for that specific role.
It's a really good tactic there. Very good strategy. I hope you folks watching are taking notes because it's some really good and again tangible information that you can use right away. Sure. So, Nyla, I would love to get your thoughts on this one. Again, how should a candidate determine if a job is a good fit before applying? And then what can candidates do to make the application stand out from the crowd?
I totally agree with Kelly. I think looking at those qualifications, and if you meet them, like apply, don't psych yourself out because you don't have all of them. I think sometimes as women, we see that we don't fit every box. And so we will talk ourselves out of applying for a role. So if you meet 3/4 of them, like absolutely go for it. No one is stopping you. I think the next biggest thing for me is making sure that you are highlighting transferable skills and really looking at the job description. So, like Kelly said, if you know that you're big in like organization, is that also project management? Like, what on your existing resume can be turned into something that already aligns to the role that you're doing? That also might mean that say you're working in the business and you want to switch over into HR, what projects are you working on out of your day to day that also align to that? And so maybe it's time to highlight that as a bullet point versus meeting metrics because that shows that, hey, I do know what this role is looking for and I do have experience in that.
Very, very good insight there. Thank you so much, Nyla. So I really want to talk about the interview. I think that's what our audience wants to hear about. So let's talk about the interview. How can candidates best prepare for an interview? What's your go-to interview questions for all candidates? Julie, what do you think?
Man, I think preparing for interviews are so nerve-wracking, right? And every company has different styles of interviews. Whether that is maybe they do a panel interview, or maybe they do like a long, at Capital One we call our interview a power day because you are meeting with 4 or 5 different people and it really feels like a power day. So I think asking the recruiter that you are working with, like, all right, What do I need to prep for? What are the different types of interviews? Are there any sample questions that you can provide me? I think sometimes companies are more transparent than others. Sometimes you can find different questions online, or the recruiter will prep you with specific questions. Others are more secretive, right? And they're like, oh, we're not going to share that. We want you to come as prepared as possible. So I think Googling and seeing if there's anything that you can find online, or even if you know anybody who works at that company, maybe if you search on LinkedIn and see like, oh man, I went to college with that person. Maybe I'll ask them for some tips or perspective. Really asking the recruiter like, hey, what can you share? I think for me, when interviewing individuals, I try to make people feel as comfortable as I can, because I know that interviewing can be really nerve-wracking. And I think sometimes you forget like your answers, or you're like, oh my gosh, I've used this example for 4 different questions. So I also try to tell people, hey, try to write out some different situations or different examples that you can really pull from, because you don't want to use the same example for 4 different questions, or use the same example for every single interviewer, because the interviewers are going to talk and debrief, and you don't want them to be like, oh yeah, she said the same thing, she said the same thing, like same story. And I think if you have those like written down and prepped that you can refer back to, so that if you're nervous and your mind goes blank, you can refer to your notes and be like, oh, great question, I do have a couple examples. um, for me, my favorite question to ask is typically something along the lines of like, I really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything else that you wanted to share? Or maybe anything else that I didn't ask you that you wanted to highlight? And I try to give the individual like an opportunity to, whether that is sell themselves, whether that is clarify something that they're like, oh, that wasn't exactly how I meant to answer, and leave it a little bit open ended. Maybe it's just them saying like, hey, this was a great conversation, or maybe they're good and they're like, no, I'm all set, thank you. But trying to leave it as open ended, to really ensure that they can feel comfortable, but also give them an opportunity to share anything else that they want to during our time together.
I love that. Julie, again, thank you so much for the insight there. I know folks are jotting this stuff down. This is gold right here. So thank you so much. Kelly, same question. I would love to know, what are your go-to interview questions for all candidates?
Yeah, so my go-to question, and I'll get into a few tidbits of advice.
Mm-hmm.
I always like to close my interviews and phone conversations with, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? What do you like to do for fun on the weekends? As I mentioned, Capital One is about bringing your whole self to work. And so if there's something that we can bond over, maybe the individual is a bit avid sports player, we can talk about that, or they love to cook or travel, or read. I'm always looking for book recommendations from candidates and people in general. So trying to build that personal connection, because I think sometimes it can seem intimidating to speak to a recruiter and forget that we're human too. So I usually try and build that rapport. What do you like to do for fun? And then usually it leads into different conversations about fun things that I've done with my team or here at Capital One. So I always love to ask what people like to do for fun. And then some advice for how to practice for an interview or prepare. I got ahead of myself there, is to really practice. As a recruiter, I also am nervous about interviews. I can assure you that everybody has some kind of nerves in the back of their mind. So practice. I recommend really doing some research about the company that you're interviewing with. You're getting to know the company as much as we're getting to know you as the candidate. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Why is this position open? What are the expectations in the first 90 days for this role? What would make someone a successful candidate for this position? These are all things that you are probably wondering as a candidate. So don't be afraid to ask. And then really use your recruiter. It's your recruiter's job to give you as much advice and support through the process as they can. So if they have advice on how to ace the interview, any resources, I know here at Capital One, we give a lot of candidate prep resources on how to handle our different types of interviews. So really taking those opportunities and taking advantage of those are crucial to your success. And really just asking questions and have fun with it. We're getting to know you as a person, when you're getting to know us as a company, really any company in general. So those are my tidbits.
Absolutely, Kelly. Thank you so much. And I love that that tidbit about having fun with it at the end of the day. I think that's something that's helped me personally, in interview processes. If you try to remove the pressure, I think it makes a big difference in the atmosphere and in the energy that you're bringing right to that interview. And I think that the interviewer appreciates that as well, that you're because it more so makes it seem like you're bringing your authentic self, right? If you're coming in making it a little bit more fun.
For sure. And I think that each interview, whether you land the job or not, is an opportunity to network and practice those skills. So whether it becomes your next permanent position or your next career move, just engaging in those conversations, I think, is great practice and great opportunities to network. There are people that I've interviewed with over the years, and I'm connected with them on LinkedIn still, and we kind of keep in touch on where people have gone in their career journey. So whether or not it works out in your favor or in their favor, I think it's a great opportunity all around.
Absolutely. Take it as a learning experience, if nothing else, right? Fantastic. Thank you. So we're going to move a little bit in a different direction here. And can you guys offer any tips and tricks to our audience about crafting job applications with gaps on their resume? Nyla, any thoughts on this one?
I think the biggest thing here is don't create a false narrative. So you could have a gap for a multitude of reasons, and you shouldn't feel shy about potentially sharing like what that reason might be. We're the state of the economy right now, and there's a lot of companies that are doing layoffs. It's very known like across the job market. And so I think sharing if you were impacted by that is like totally fair. So don't create this narrative or what you think the company like wants to hear. I think we've all seen recently that companies are making a shift to create more environments for you to bring your whole self to work. And so being comfortable to say, you know what, this is something that happened in my life. However, like during that time, I did XYZ is super impactful. So just go with the truth. You always want to be honest. So I would think just don't create a false narrative.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Nyla. Julie, any tips or tricks you can offer our audience today about crafting job applications with gaps on their resume?
I think Nyla nailed it. I mean, I think own the gap, right? And like Nyla said, there are many reasons why you may have a gap on your resume. You could have been unfortunately impacted by layoffs or by a reduction in force. Maybe you took maternity leave or took time off to raise your children or be at home, or maybe it's a medical emergency. Maybe you were traveling, maybe it's a sabbatical. So I think, own the gap. I do think when there is a gap, if you can include maybe how you were using that time to invest in your skills or development, or what you were able to learn during that time off, whether that was taking courses, or I was traveling through Europe and, I was learning different cultures. I think really, being transparent and honest with that, and not being embarrassed about the gap on your resume. And whether that is a few months because you were applying and it was just a tough time in the market, or it was several years because you had a shift in your career. Maybe you went back to school. So I think just owning the gap, being transparent, and sharing, what skills or development you were able to get out of that time.
I love that. And I think that's something that our audience really needs to know and embrace, is to not be embarrassed by it. Because I've heard, plenty of times that folks don't know what to do when it comes to that. Like, oh my God, there's a gap in my work experience. I should just fill it in and say that I stayed at a company longer than I did, or like they'll make something up. And no one wants to do that, but they feel so embarrassed that they feel like that's the only way that they're gonna not be looked down on for taking time off or being forced to have time off, depending on the situation. So I'm so happy that you both said that, bring that honesty and don't be embarrassed. So folks, again, just jot these golden nuggets down, because this is great stuff. So moving along a little bit here. Now, our community has told us that it can feel more challenging to do virtual video interviews versus the old school making in person, connections. So do you have any advice for candidates to best present themselves and make genuine connections in virtual interviews? Kelly, would love your thoughts on this one.
Yes, and I 100% acknowledge that virtual interviewing is a lot more difficult or can be more intimidating than in-person interviewing. So for me, what's really helpful is I like to place the person's face that I'm speaking with right under my webcam. I try not to use an external monitor for interviews. That way, even if I'm looking at my notes and typing on my computer, I'm still looking in their direction and not looking off on the side. So that's my biggest piece of advice there. If it helps, hide your own view. It can be pretty distracting to see another face, especially your own. So don't be afraid to hide that. Heck, you could even hide the person you're speaking to if that's making you really nervous. So that is that piece of advice. And then in terms of how to best present yourselves and make genuine connections, I love to do a little bit of research and LinkedIn stalking before I meet with someone. It's really nice to know if someone has been with a company for 15 years versus 15 months. The questions I probably am asking those people are going to be vastly different. What has kept you here for 15 years? What brought you to this company? So really doing a little bit of research. And then also ask someone in your life to practice with you. My partner, he was interviewing for a job recently, and I was quizzing him and giving him some practice questions. So I think just getting comfortable with the uncomfortable is a great place to start, and getting some practice in for sure.
Absolutely. Dynamite answers there. Thank you so much, Kelly. Julie, again, same question. Would love to get your thoughts on this one.
I love what Kelly said about practicing, because my dad was actually recently interviewing, and he was nervous about using Zoom. At his company, they were using Teams, so he just wasn't used to Zoom. And he'd also gotten new headphones, and he was like, "Jules, can we hop on a quick trial run?" And I was so honored, though. I was like, "Yes, Dad, you did the right thing. Prep beforehand. You want to make sure that you can get the kinks out of the way. Don't be 5 minutes late because you weren't used to dialing into Zoom, because you're used to Teams. I mean, if that happens, that's okay, right? Just manage through it, hop on, acknowledge it, apologize. But if you can, prep beforehand. Make sure that your new AirPods work, or whatever headphones that you're using. I also think lighting is important, and a clutter-free background. We joked as we were prepping for this, yeah, I just moved the laundry off to the side. I bought a mini ring light from Amazon. It's $18. It clips right onto my laptop. We've been working from home long enough that I feel like there's no excuse to have bad lighting, and you want people to see your face and to really present well on Zoom, or Teams, or whatever platform that you're using. So I think if you can do a trial run, it is super, super helpful. And then maybe an obvious one, but make sure that you have stable internet. I think that's always a really tough one that, is kind of anxiety building, and will make you sweat if you're oh my gosh, the internet is going in and out. I just cut out, the person's freezing. Sometimes that's out of our control. And unfortunately, you do have to manage through that if it happens. And again, just acknowledge it. Oh my gosh, we're having some internet issues, or there's storms. I'm so sorry. I'm going to dial in. I think if you can manage through that, do it. But if you can prep and make sure that you have that stable internet, please do that. And then if taking notes during the interview, and if you're somebody who prefers to type or even write, I would say call that out, so that the interviewer knows that if you are looking off camera, or if you're writing something down, they know what you're doing. They should assume that you're taking notes, but it can be distracting if somebody is maybe, like Kelly said, looking at their second monitor or writing things down. Sometimes the interviewer is nervous too, and they're like, "Oh, are they paying attention to me? Or are they with me on this?" And that could be as simple as I really want to make sure that I'm taking valuable notes. If you see me look away, I'm just writing some things down. I think for building connections, I think that one can be a tough one. Like, I think most of us, we feel like we present better in person, or you can really just build that deeper rapport in person. So I always like to prepare like just some interesting answers to how are you? That your interviewer is going to start with like, how are you, or what's going on, or how was your weekend?
Mhm.
Um, Share a little bit about yourself, whether that was like, yeah, I actually ran in a half marathon this weekend. I didn't, but if I did, I ran in a half marathon this weekend and it was great. Or yeah, I'm super excited because my sister is coming to visit this weekend and we plan on doing XYZ. I think as much as you can inject yourself into the conversation, it humanizes you. It puts the person at ease, and best case scenario, it's something that they have experience with or can talk to, and boom, you're off to a great start because you've just bonded over something.
Boom, there it is. Exactly. You just kind of got to find your in, and that is a great way to do it. And if nothing else, it makes them remember you. It goes back to what we said earlier about standing out. So Julie, just dropping gems all day long. I wanted to actually get Nyla involved as well. So Nyla, if you have any tips or advice, please jump on in.
For sure. I think in a virtual setting, sometimes people have backgrounds that are interesting, whether a virtual or a live one. Ask what's going on in the background. I know I did while we were in the waiting room earlier, asked about Lachine's background. I was like, hey, like, what are these medals? I know I have a really interesting home office and people ask me about it all the time. It's another way to find a fun conversation starter to kind of make both of you feel at ease because hey, even if it's virtual, sometimes you're like, oh, that's a really nice view. And they're like, actually, I took this on vacation. It's my favorite place that I visited. You learn a little bit about each other and you can build connection off of that.
Absolutely. And a little fun fact for the folks listening in here, these medals back here, this was also set up when I first interviewed with Fairygodboss, and the CEO was also a runner, and she saw those and instantly we built a rapport before she even knew how to pronounce my name. So just going to show that, again, just having that background and just being honest and bringing yourself into the conversation is just a huge game changer and a way to set yourself up for success. So I'm living proof that these ladies know what they're talking about. All righty, let's see. Okay. So here's one that everyone wants to know. Nyla, I'm going to keep this on you to kick us off, okay? Now, can you please share a little more about company culture at Capital One? And don't be shy. I really want to get some detail on this one for each and every one of you from your perspectives. How are associates supported throughout their careers at Capital One?
Yes, such a loaded question. I think as Kelly and Jules mentioned in the beginning, is like work-life balance is a huge thing here. Probably keeping me here. As I mentioned, I coach cheer and dance. And so being able to have life outside of work and be able to um, bring my whole self because at Capital One, we're interested in great people. And so that means that you have interest outside of what you do on a daily basis from 9 to 5. And how can we support you in that? I also think while we're returning to the office and even in our virtual spaces when we're at home, the collaborative work environment is so important. I think it creates a space for peer learning. And so I'm able to go to the person that's sitting next to me, or they might be a couple rows down and say, like, hey, like, can you show me how to do this?
Mhm.
I'm lost. I missed it in the training, that hands-on attention, or just even having candid conversations while you're taking a walk to get water is so impactful to the development of associates. I think you're able to meet people in a way that you wouldn't necessarily get all the time. And so today I've met people who sit on our tech SNG recruiting team, which is students and grads. And so I don't work with them on a daily basis, but they're sitting literally next to me. And I have the opportunity to engage with them and kind of ask them questions about their day to day and figure out what similarities we have in our roles and like how we can potentially collaborate in the future. And that development of that short conversation, it will go a long way because I've made connections.
Mhm. I understand that, and I love that, Nyla. Thank you so much for that. Kelly, same question there. What can you tell us about the company culture at Capital One and how associates are supported throughout their careers?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nyla is absolutely correct with her answer as well. But one of the things that I've really loved about working at Capital One is the opportunity to have regular development conversations with my manager. Where do I see my career going? Am I happy in my current role? What skills am I using? Which ones do I want to be using? And just being able to have that candid conversation on a regular basis. Prior to joining Capital One, I was always in roles where I felt like I stuck around the company until I was absolutely miserable and then had to like awkwardly put in my notice and go find something else to do. Whereas here at Capital One, the moment that you're like, this job is no longer fulfilling this box or filling my cup or giving me life, let's figure out where you can pivot and what other skills are you looking to use. A leader once said in a meeting one time, like, don't look at your career for what do you want to do for the rest of your life or what do you want to be when you grow up. Think of it more as, what are you planning on doing for the next 18 to 24 months? And what skills can you use to get there? And how can that kind of help you get to that end goal? So that's been really helpful for me. And I just love being able to have that open dialogue with my manager about, hey, yes, I've worked in HR for the majority of my career, but maybe I want to try something in the tech space, or maybe I want to try something in cyber or something. So just having that open dialogue has been really wonderful.
Love it. I love that there's a company that, appreciates that and then lets you kind of discover yourself or rediscover yourself in a way. That's fantastic. Julie, same question.
Really good answers so far.
Mhm.
I feel like my answer is going to complement both Nyla and Kelly's answer, but we do have a lot of investment in growth. And as I spoke previously about that internal mobility, to help individuals prepare for that internal mobility or that next opportunity that they may want to pursue, we have a lot of really great learning opportunities available for associates at all levels. We have monthly leadership lighthouse sessions for people leaders where they are able to hear on different topics, from managing through difficult conversations to managing high performers, and really ensuring that we are investing in our people leaders and providing individuals with the tools and resources and information to do their job the best way possible. We also have different instructor-led and online courses to where you could pursue different opportunities. Maybe if I want to learn how to code, and I am not a software engineer in any way, but we have a whole suite of different courses on this throughout our tech college. And I could, take development courses on this and learn how to do this so that if I wanted to apply to something else, I would have the skills and information to be able to, perform that next job. So a lot of different opportunities to continue challenging and growing. For me, I recently met with my manager in one of our monthly development conversations, and we mapped out a development plan for me for the next 3 months. And I've identified 6 to 10 different online courses that I'm going to take. And in each of our weekly one-on-ones, we're going to debrief the different courses and talk about, what I got out of those, how I'm able to apply that learning into my day-to-day. I also have a mentor and somebody who I identified within Capital One as a leader that I really look up to. And I meet with her usually once every other month. And it is somebody that is not on my direct team. It is a total safe space and somebody who I'm able to get her perspective, share what I'm working on, and have just somebody else in my corner that is helping really encourage me and help grow my development and invest in me. And all of these, different kind of offerings that we have are totally free. So it's just, hey, I'm interested in this, and I want to learn, like I said, how to code, which I don't think I could code, but if I wanted to, I could learn how to at Capital One.
Very, very, very nice. I love that. Cool stuff. Cool stuff. Thank you so much, everybody. You're again just dynamite answers there. I love this so much. Now, Nyla, I wanted to ask, what's the most useful piece of career advice that you've received?
Ooh, I think this kind of goes both professionally and personally. There is no perfect path to anything.
Mm.
And when you have to pivot, not blaming yourself for the pivot. Some things are truly out of your control, and it is not a direct reflection on you if you have to pivot. I plan events, or this past recruiting season, we saw record number of applications, and being able to pivot in the midst of that, that has nothing to do with how I show up every day or my performance, but truly just like a matter of circumstances. And so pivoting is okay. It is a life lesson. And you can't grow where you're comfortable. So embrace the pivot, because something good will come out of it.
Embrace the pivot. We need to make that a hashtag BAP. Embrace the pivot. I'm not going to forget that one. Embrace. I love that so much. Kelly, same question for you. I'd love to know what's the most useful piece of career advice that you've received.
Absolutely. So for me, it's kind of two parts. So don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to say no. It is far better to ask for help than assume you know something, make a mistake because you're too afraid to speak up, and then have it have downstream effects. And don't be afraid to politely say no. If somebody presents you with an opportunity and your plate is too full, or it's not going to be something that furthers your development, or it's not something that gives you life and really sucks the life out of you and your work, it is okay to say no. I recommend saying yes as many times as you can, like get those opportunities and take them, but don't be afraid to say, no, not today. Someone once told me, when you are asked about different opportunities and presented things, instead of immediately jumping to say yes, respond with, hey, let me check my calendar, let me check my priorities, and I'll get back to you tomorrow. Then you really have time to sit on it and decide, is this what I want to do? Is this really going to further my development? Is this something I have bandwidth for? Instead of just saying, yes, 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 I do it all. Because then things might start falling apart. So don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to say no.
I love that so much. Julie, I'm going to throw this one out there too for you. I'm just so curious myself personally. What's the most useful piece of career advice that you've received?
I think for me, this is career advice, but also life advice. I think it's control what you can control. I am certainly somebody that puts a lot of pressure on myself, and I have super high expectations, and I, really want to be the best, and I'm competitive, but I'm more so competitive with myself. And oftentimes I will like let other things out of my control really kind of dictate or kind of get in my head, or like, oh my gosh, and control what you can control. Take a step back. Sometimes if you need to take a beat, take a walk, and don't let things that are out of your control. Try not to let things that are out of your control stress you out. Because when you worry about things out of your control, you're worried about the wrong things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That was a lesson that I learned a number of years ago. And it's something that I tell every single one of my friends. I tell my wife, and I tell my son, my teenage son, control the controllables. It is such an important thing that we all I think it's just great advice across the board, professionally and personally, because you're entitled to feel a certain type of way, right? When things don't go the way you planned, you're entitled to feel that. But it's what you do next that really determines the kind of person you are, your character. So I always say control the controllables. And to Nyla's point, pivot, embrace the pivot. Love this so much, guys. So we're going to do the next couple of questions will be a little bit different. I'm going to do it Jeopardy style, basically. I'm going to ask the question, and whoever unmutes first gets it. So first off, what's the one career move you've made that you're most proud of?
I think
Nyla?
I made a career change. And so I switched from being in our commercial bank here at Capital One to recruiting, very different. And so I'm so proud of it because it taught me that I can do hard things and I could make the pivot because while I wasn't looking for a new role, I noticed within myself that I was starting to get interested in other things, and that internal mobility is such a huge piece, because I was supported by my leadership at the time to pursue that, and so making the switch and taking all those changes to my resume and, like, making it stand out so I could make that change, it was a lot of work, but it was very rewarding in the end because I'm still in recruiting.
There you go. Anybody else want to answer while we have it?
For me, getting into technical recruiting and jumping into the world of technology was a really intimidating move that I made. And it's been really cool to learn about the capabilities that software engineers have, machine learning, all the different things, both from my time prior to Capital One and coming here. So something I was super nervous about and underestimated the learning curve, but it's been really cool to see how the industry has changed over the last couple of years, and getting to learn a little bit something about how all the things in our world work has been cool.
So cool. So cool. Julie, anything?
I think just really not being afraid to say yes to different opportunities that present themselves. And sometimes you have to kind of create an opportunity for yourself. And what I mean by that is I think there's often times where we're tasked with a project or involved in an initiative and you're not necessarily really looking forward to it. Like that's not what you're most passionate about, but it's how you manage through that and what you're focused on throughout that and really focused on the results and the impact. And it again, if you can control what you can control and focus on that, I that's often the best result.
Love it. Same rules, Jeopardy style. Whoever unmutes first gets it. So is there something you do in your spare time that aids you to thrive in your professional life? Julie.
Oh, I don't know. It might have been Kelly, but I'll go. I'll go. um, I think for me, I really enjoy physical activity. I am somebody that like I'm a runner. I love to do Pilates and yoga, and I'm also a big fan of my daily walk. I think that having that time to clear my head, get a sweat in, but really just, clear my head mentally. I feel like when I do take that time for myself, I'm able to come back to my desk, come back to my work, and really feel refreshed and like I do have a clear mind. And even, during the day, I'll take some meetings while walking or have a one-on-one with a team member on a walk. And I think for me that's really energizing as well.
I love that. Kelly, did you want to jump in?
Yeah. So the one thing that comes to mind is I host a little bit of like pub trivia on the side as a part-time like fun opportunity. And as someone who works in HR and recruiting, I feel like I'm a professional small talker and can talk to a stranger about anything. I'm that person in the airport who talks to people. Where are you going? What's bringing you to Richmond? I'm probably not everyone's favorite person to sit next to for that reason. But engaging in something that's fun, lighthearted, and I can really talk off the cuff is really fun for me. And I love music, and getting to pick a bunch of fun jams to play during that is really cool. And then just getting to meet all different types of people and meeting them where they are is really fun for me.
I love that. And Kelly, just the FYI, as a New Yorker, I'm very anti small talk, not gonna lie. But if it were you sitting next to me, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Okay. Nyla, did you have any spare time activities or things you do that help you thrive professionally?
Sure. My family makes fun of me for this, but I love TV. I watch anything and everything. And if I don't watch it, I've tried to watch it, and it has really helped me, kind of like Kelly. I can talk about any TV show, which oftentimes when you're in small talk situations, asking people what they're watching and then being able to either recommend something or have a conversation about the latest episode is really, really cool.
Absolutely. Fun fact there, TV is what kind of helped me meet my wife, because when I first met her, we really didn't have too much to talk about. She was very shy and I'm very open and extroverted. And luckily, we both were into How I Met Your Mother. And that's how I was able to get her to finally talk to me. So, spoiler alert, we ended up getting married. So that worked out. But thank you, TV. Let's see. So we do have about 10 minutes left. I did want to ask, again, Jeopardy style, what has been one of your biggest joys or challenges as a leader? Let's go, Julie.
I'll go. I feel like for me, I could think of a lot of joys, but I'm going to go with kind of the tough one of challenges as a
Mhm.
leader. I think for me, one of the challenges has been really managing and leading individuals through the unknown. And I think over the last year or so, just seeing what's going on in the market, and we see so many individuals impacted by layoffs and just the uncertainty in the economy. Um, and I feel those same uncertainties. And as a leader, it is oftentimes very challenging to really reassure your team or your direct reports that it's going to be okay, and not being like you're misleading them, but really trying to reassure them when you yourself are having those same thoughts or those same fears. So for me, it's trying to be as transparent as possible and share what I can share and relate to them as much as I can, but also
Nice.
really maintain that positivity and
Yes.
ensure that they feel supported and heard, and able to really lead through that.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Who wants to go next?
I can go
Kelly.
next. So for me as a recruiter, the biggest joy in my career is every time I get to call the candidate and say, congratulations, you've landed the job. It is such seemingly a small part of the work that we do here, but man, is it sometimes life-changing for these candidates. And it is so fun to have them almost like chuckle sometimes, like, are you serious? Is this real? Yes, it's real. I'm very excited to give you this phone call. So that is my biggest joy in the work that I do. And then the biggest challenge that I experience in the work that I do is that there's just so many candidates and not being able to unfortunately we can't hire everyone. It's really tough, and I would say, like, my piece of advice is, like, even if you're not selected for the position you're applying for, it's not a never situation. It's a, hey, this isn't the right fit, or hey, not right now. Like, don't give up. I applied into Capital One a handful of times before I landed this exact position that I'm in now. So know that just because it's a no and one door is closing, another one is likely about to open, and it could be an opportunity for the future. So that's probably the hardest thing for me.
Absolutely. And just to echo that, I do want the audience to really absorb that, because even me, with Fairygodboss, like the initial role that I was interviewing for, it didn't end up being what I ended up doing. And I actually love what I ended up doing. So just one door closing does not mean that another one won't open at the exact same company. So just don't give up hope. I love that, Kelly. I'm so happy that you said that. Nyla, anything you wanted to add in?
I think it can be a double-edged sword, but finding the right line of transparency with your team. And so in that gray space, being transparent of like, hey, I also don't have the answer. We're walking through this together, and letting your team know that they're not alone. Um, and I think with transparency comes a lot of trust building, which is super important on a team. And so being able to build an even greater rapport with your team, that whether y'all stay together for 10 years on the team or like you take different life paths, you still have a connection that you can lean on because y'all held each other down through that gray area.
Mm-hmm. It's like going through the trenches together. I love that. I love that. So this one is going to be for all three of you. And Kelly, I'd love for you to start. At Fairygodboss, we have a tradition of asking our panelists the following. What is an accomplishment, personal or professional, that you're most proud of?
Oh, this is a tough one. For me personally, I mentioned it earlier, but my most recent personal accomplishment that I'm super very proud of is that I was able to go see Taylor Swift Eras Tour last weekend in Atlanta. And I'm begging my husband if we can go again, which I don't think is in the cards. Personal accomplishment of mine, but professionally, real quickly, we are launching our very first cybersecurity internship this summer. And so I recruited all the candidates for it. And now I'm getting to help make sure that they have a really awesome summer with Capital One. And that's been really fun for me to get to pivot and stretch some project management and leadership skills there.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Congrats on T Swift, by the way. I still haven't seen her yet. Julie, same question for you, please.
I think for me professionally, and as I mentioned, there's been a lot of joys professionally, but I've been a people leader for about 8+ years, and I've had the opportunity to and the pleasure of promoting many individuals, as well as being a mentor for a handful of others. And I think for me, that's one of the things I'm most proud of is really partnering with others and helping them grow their career, and whether that's advancing to the next level or simply just growing their skill set, growing their competence, for me, that's something that just gives me a lot of energy and makes the job worth it.
I love that. I love that. That's amazing. And last but certainly not least, Nyla.
For me, it would be being able to like go back and give back to my alma mater, as well as institutions that are very similar. I graduated from an HBCU, and I'm very proud of my school. But in my role, I actually get to recruit at the school that I went to, and
That's
I
awesome.
think my strategy is set up how I was recruited and making sure that I'm meeting the students where they are and building genuine connections with them. Like, it's finals week. Are y'all okay? Are y'all good? How can I help you? Checking in when various things are happening on campus, which is really proven to be impactful for me on a day to day. It gives me energy, and but also making sure that they have the tools that they need to go sit at whatever table they want to go sit at after graduation. Um, because someone told me a long time ago, you should always send the elevator back down. And so I'm just trying to do so every day, whether it's with a nugget of wisdom or with a internship or full-time role.
Ooh, you should always bring the elevator back down. Did anybody else get the whoo? Oh my, that was so good. I never heard that before. Okay, so thank you so much to Kelly, Julie, and Nyla for joining us today and for sharing such fantastic and actually tangible advice. And thanks to all of you who tuned in for the discussion. Now, as a note, we'll be sending out a recording of today's event, along with resources to learn more about opportunities at Capital One. In the meantime, be sure to check out Capital One's profile and jobs right here on Fairygodboss. Also, we'd love to hear your feedback to help us improve on future events. So please head to the Typeform tab on the right side of your screen and share your thoughts in a 1-minute survey. Also say some nice things about me. So thanks, everyone. We will see you all next time. Hashtag embrace the pivot. Bye-bye, everybody.